Hey guys, Ellen Jody here, the PLC lead for high school dance with the Godot communities. It is January of 2022, so I hope you had a nice holiday and got some much needed rest with your friends and family. I know I did. This whole webinar will just be about assessment. They'll be in three separate sections. This first section is just a review of our diagnostic, our formative, and our summative assessments. Before we begin on that, I didn't want to dwell on the negative, but we all know how hard this year has been. It's not just here in Georgia, but everywhere, I believe. As I mentioned, I'm in grad school, and our Zoom classes, there's been much discussion about all of the behavioral problems with students this year. People in my cohort are all over the US, so the issues are everywhere and at every level. I feel especially bad for those that are teaching elementary school. I mean, they're dealing with kids who have never been at school at all and have missed crucial socialization steps in their emotional growth. I'm actually mentoring through NDEO a first year teacher in elementary school dance in the New York City public schools. She's struggling, and I feel for her. We've been talking through all kinds of strategies for classroom management and then also ways for her to cope with all the stress herself. One afternoon, she sent me a picture of 3 Ben & Jerry's ice cream containers. So that's one coping mechanism. I think we all thought, well, at least I thought last year was going to be the worst of the pandemic years in education, but I'm now thinking that I was wrong. Last year was really rough, but this year is in its own special category. Believe it or not, for me, hall duty has been the most stressful, which is sort of ridiculous. These kids just don't want to stay put in their class or wherever it is they are supposed to be. A year and a half of roaming around has these kids not knowing how to stay put for 55 minutes. Those of you on block schedule, how are you doing that? How are you keeping them in one place for an hour and a half? So I was out in hall duty. I was trying to get this kid, not my student, to get to a class. He was roaming around, trying to wander the halls. And finally, I flagged him to admin, who was in the cafeteria. And of course, they just sent him back towards me and was like, just, go to class. And as he was passing me, he was like, "You're doing too much." And I'm like, "Dude, you're doing too much. Just go to class." So even my dancers, who are generally well behaved, are having a hard time staying put. They come in, and then every other second they've got to go to the bathroom, they've got to go to the vending machines, they've got to go this and that. So I sort of made a new rule for this semester that I'm so sorry, nobody's going to the vending machine. I mean, you can go to the bathroom, of course. I'm like, no vending machine. Anyway, all of this is stressful and mentally and physically draining on us. And then on top of all of this, we have to have extra grace for these kids. Even though we are all going through this as well, they are suffering the social emotional growth losses. So to segue into my assessment topic, how are we assessing our students in this rough time? Me personally, I don't want dance to become a stressor or something that they don't want to do because it's just an extra step that they need to do. But I still need to have high standards. So how do we balance that? So we can talk a bit more about that in one of the other segments, but for now, let's just review the assessments. So diagnostic, your diagnostic assessment is just what it sounds like. You are diagnosing what the students know. What is their skill level? What is their level of understanding of the content you're covering? This is basically your pre-test. In our dance classes, we do this constantly. You can tell in the first few minutes of a dance class where your students are and what they need. If I'm teaching a Horton class and we start with the roll downs through the spine, watching them do just that gives me a wealth of information about where to go with class that day or that semester or whichever. So even just laying them on the floor in the beginning of the year and looking at how they're in alignment or how they're not in alignment can tell me a lot of what I need to know and what needs to be worked on and how to do it. You all know this instinctively and move your class in the right direction depending on what you see. However, your administration does not know this, most likely. And anything you do in your class is pretty much like speaking a different language. to the administration. So I think that this is the challenge in our field, is translating what we do into language that your admin can understand, or just basically defining what we do in our classrooms for the administration. All of the education speak, all that stuff, we do it all the time in dance. It's just defining it for people who might not understand it. So I have, I'm going to put these documents that I'm looking at in the document section of the Godot community, so you can have this. But I just thought we'd talk through a little diagnostic rubric that I have. So this might be for an intro class or a lower level class. My criteria talks about engagement, commitment to movement, focus and concentration. And these are based off the GSE, the Georgia Standards of Excellence. Body awareness and control is my next category. Next category is stamina, flexibility, and coordination. And then I've got expressive skills and rhythm. And I've got memorization, if you get that far. And then again, improvisational skills, if you would get that far in a class that's sort of an intro or a dance one. And then I have, which we use at Godot, the across the top of the rubric is a 4, which is our goal. Like, we are making our goal. We're doing all of that. Number 3 is valuable performance. And then 2 is moving in the right direction. And then 1 is drifting. So, and like I said, you can read all this. I'll put it in the document section. So this is just an example of a diagnostic rubric that you could use with your students. Second, we can go to formative assessment. So formative assessments is also something we dance teachers do constantly. I mean, and I'm looking at my script, and on my script I put constantly in all caps. These assessments are informal, in-process checks for knowledge or understanding. This tells you how they are processing the information. Are their skills improving, or is there a need for review or remediation? These are so easy in dance technique because our students are in front of us showing what they are doing, and then in return, we offer real-time feedback or suggestions or corrections to the students. Think of this in terms of maybe a pirouette exercise. I usually split the room down the middle, and then everyone stays on the floor. Stage right does the exercise first, and then stage left does the exercise first. That lets me look at both groups a little bit more targeted. And then once I've watched, I make the decision to review how to use the core to have a higher passe, or I review the 4th position stance that I want them to use. Or here I can also make adjustments and use differentiation by asking a few students to attempt a double pirouette, or telling a student or two to just practice a pirouette balance. A passe balance to begin with. I mean, obviously in the middle of your dance class, you're not going to have these graded formative assessments, but you can, for a graded assessment, you could do a bunch of different things in class. You could have them work with a partner. You can have them create a goal and then create a video. Could be a short vocabulary combo. They could do a self-assessment, and then a daily dance assessment. My daily dance assessment is basically, are you doing what you're supposed to do in class? They start with 100 at the beginning of the week, and then as we go, it either stays at 100 or it goes down from there. Most of the infractions for me are dressing. It's like, can you just please wear a black shirt? It's all I want. It's not that hard. I digress. So anyway, that's our formative. I don't have a formative assessment. I will put one in the document section. So we did diagnostic, we did formative, and now is your summative category. So a summative assessment is the final check for learning at the end of a unit, at the end of a class, or at the end of a project. It's usually a high stakes grade. In my classroom, my summative assessments are generally the end of semester performances. But this could be a grade on a major project. And I just talked about my daily dance assessment. I usually make one per month, a summative assessment, so we know we're all in check with what we're doing in class. This is going to look really, really different depending on what your school's gradebook requirements are, or what your admin wants from you and your grades. So anyway, that's your summative. So this is our review of the diagnostic, the formative, and the summative assessment and what they look like in our dance classrooms. I know if you are new to public ed, maybe coming from a studio setting, a private studio setting, or some other dance job, just remember, it can be overwhelming to talk about the formative, the diagnostic, the summative, the blah of assessment, but we do all of these things. We do them in our classes without thinking about them, and we really need to start getting used to defining these things, because that way your admin knows exactly what you're doing. Most likely, if your admin or whoever's doing your evaluation, if they walk in the classroom, they've got no idea what's happening. I mean, I don't mean to be mean, but I mean, I think we've all experienced that. So you just need to be able to define what you're doing. Okay, so the next segment will be talking about technique assessments and how we can do that. I will see you there.